For more than 2 decades, across England, sexual predators concealed themselves under different facades. An admired doctoral student, a trusted police officer, a man who faked his death to escape, or a drifter moving through brightly lit streets. Their common ground was not appearance or origin, but the way they slipped into gaps of society, places where victims believed they were safe. From Canal Street in Manchester to student dormitories in London, ordinary flats and alleys became the backdrop for silence being taken away. Sentences stretching for decades, closed only on paper. But the haunting question remained. In a country thought to be guarded by strict law, how could the most dangerous figures exist within everyday life for so long? Canal Street, Manchester, summer 2024. A crowded street of shops and bars. Neon light falling onto the brick pavement where visitors gathered past midnight. Murad often appeared there. He stood among the crowd, eyes moving around, drawing no attention. When someone separated from friends, staggering on the way home, he approached. A soft voice, offering help, offering directions. It all began as an act of kindness. Victims described the same detail. Mali led them into a narrow alley, the light fading, only footsteps and damp walls on both sides. The moment they realized the path did not lead home, it was already too late. He attacked, took control, and seized wallets and phones. Then he left them in darkness, in the heavy silence of deserted alleys. In 7 short months, from February to July, at least 3 people, both male and female, followed him into those alleys. The official record stopped at that number, but police suspected there were more. A witness told the press, "I remember he held my arm very tightly, as if afraid I would run away, but still smiled and said, 'Don't worry, I'll take you home.'" Those words, recorded in the file, carried 2 sides, both a promise and a sentence. The investigation began when victims reported the incidents. At first, police did not link the cases together. Manchester was a busy city. Reports of sexual assaults were not rare. But then, a common pattern emerged. The same Canal Street location, the same method of leading into alleys. Surveillance cameras captured the image of a man with a slight tilt in his walk, always wearing a dark coat. His face was unclear, but the outline matched the descriptions. On July 15th, an ambush was set. Plainclothes officers surrounded Canal Street, observing the familiar approach. When Mali grasped a young person's arm and led them into an alley, officers stepped out. He was arrested on the spot, offering no resistance, face cold, as if he had expected it. In his pocket, police found a mobile phone, a few small notes, and one small item, a plastic bracelet belonging to one of the victims. In the interrogation room, Mali remained silent for hours. When required to respond, he only said, "I only wanted to help them." The statement was recorded verbatim, serving as evidence of denial to the end. But DNA, testimony, and surveillance closed the circle. On July 24, 2025, the Manchester court found him guilty in 5 counts of rape, along with charges of robbery. The formal sentencing was scheduled for October 6th. Throughout the process, the press called him the Manchester Predator, a cold nickname, but one that reflected the way he hunted among crowds thought to be the safest. The dark alleys became a repeated trap, no different from a ritual. When police examined the scenes, they noticed a small detail. Victims were often left near the point where light began to reappear, as if he wanted the boundary between darkness and light to mark the end point. The Canal Street community, long accustomed to noise and movement, fell silent after the reports. A bar owner said, "I still saw him standing on the street, leaning against the wall, eyes looking out at the crowd." No one thought anything. People only assumed he was waiting for a friend. That ordinary sight, once the truth was revealed, became a chilling detail. In the file, police added a note. Victims shared a common point: lost their way, separated from the group, trusted the offer of help. A short remark, but it opened a larger question. In the city, is it possible that seemingly kind gestures are the most effective disguise? When the sentence was announced in October, Mali's life formally closed inside prison, but the after effect remained. The dark alley, the neon light, and the voice offering directions. A repeated detail, simple, yet enough to turn ordinary footsteps into a nightmare without end. And the final question remained open. How can one distinguish the hand that reaches out to help from the hand that pulls you into permanent darkness? But Canal Street was only one fragment. In London, a few years earlier, another man did not stand in alleys, but sat in a university library, surrounded by stacks of research. He did not lure with promises of guidance, but with dates arranged through applications, in a tidy rented room, desk lamp shining onto a doctoral thesis page. Behind an academic facade, he left not a handful of crime scenes, but more than 1,000 videos, self-recorded journals of crime without explanation. Between 2019 and 2023, in crowded London, Zhenhao lived a life that appeared ordinary. He was a doctoral candidate, present on campus, attending conferences, publishing his name in research papers. To friends, he was a quiet, cautious student abroad, notable only for diligence. But behind the door of his rented flat, another life occurred. No one knew that the desk and bookshelf became the backdrop for thousands of hours of secret footage. Zoe reached victims through dating applications. His profile was simple: young male, educated, living in London. When meetings took place, everything seemed normal. Coffee, conversation, sometimes an invitation back to his room. A colorless liquid, 1,4-butanediol, was prepared in a water bottle. When the victim drank, only minutes were needed before the body lost control. In that gap, He set the camera, pressed record. The sequence of repeated images was stored, numbered, arranged as a private collection. When police seized his devices, they found 1,270 videos, a number beyond easy comprehension. Each clip a moment taken, an individual unconscious, unaware of becoming evidence. The initial list of victims was confirmed at 11. Most of them Chinese students abroad, reluctant to contact police due to language barriers, fear of families knowing, or doubt that their words would be heard. The figure 11 was only a beginning. The files showed more faces that could not yet be identified. The investigation began with a victim who became suspicious. He woke with no memory, body drained, phone displaced. At the hospital, test results revealed traces of 1,4-butanediol in his blood. This report was sent to police, and from there, a quiet operation unfolded. Officers monitored in secret, checked electronic devices, and finally raided Zhou's flat on a morning in early 2023. He offered no resistance, only sat at his desk, his computer screen still open on a thesis page. In interrogation, Zhou showed almost no reaction. When asked about the 1,270 videos, he only said, "I kept them to study myself." The answer was recorded verbatim in the file, without explanation. The behavior carried no immediate violent impulse, but repeated, cold, as routine. Each clip mirrored the previous, the repetition leading police to describe it as an endless experiment. The trial took place in June 2025. Victims, some no longer in England, appeared through video call. They recounted their helplessness, gaps in memory, and the sense of being turned into an image on a screen without consent. The jury took only days to conclude. Guilty of serial RAPE, unlawful video storage, use of prohibited substances. On June 19th, the court sentenced him to life, with a minimum term of 24 years before parole review. The press called Zhou the PhD student predator. The irony lay in the fact that an academic facade concealed a warehouse of crime. Diplomas, research papers, all became a curtain behind which he continued. When police opened each file, they saw the faces of young men, many still in university uniforms, eyes shut, bodies motionless. Each file was numbered carefully, not by name, but by sequence. 001, 002, 003, reaching over 1,000. The student community was shaken when the case was revealed. A victim support group said, "Some do not want to return home out of shame. They live in silence, left only with the fear of being exposed." In the police file, a short line was added, "Many victims not yet identified." A dry note, but one that opened a haunting void. How many still do not know they appeared in Zhou's collection? The 24-year term seemed to close the case, but the after effect remained. On a bookshelf in the sealed flat, police found a notebook filled in small handwriting, dates, initials, chemical notations of the drug. No comment, no reason, only data recorded like results of an experiment. And the question lingered. In a city where thousands of doctoral students study, who could imagine that a thesis lay beside an archive of over 1,000 crime videos? How many of those faces will never be identified? If zhenhao hid behind thesis pages and a tidy flat, the next man wore another disguise. Not academic, but the symbol of protection. A police officer carrying a badge in uniform, once considered a guardian of the streets. But for 17 years, he turned that authority into a tool. Locked doors made the home a cell, and the oath to protect into a cover for dozens of crimes. David Carrick wore the uniform of the London Metropolitan Police. With his badge on display, he held the authority to question, to search, and most importantly, the near total trust of the public. To many, Carrick was only a dedicated officer, once stationed in Hertfordshire, once present at major events, once seen among the ranks guarding the government. But behind that exterior, over 17 years, he built a hidden life, step by step, turning the title of protector into a weapon of control. The record shows his behavior began in 2002. Carrick often approached women through dating applications, sometimes directly on the street. The presence of the police badge reassured them. Once they entered his flat, the door closed. From there, the sequence of control began. Confinement, threats, coercion. Some were locked inside for hours. Some were humiliated, forced into obedience. Later, testimonies revealed a recurring pattern. Carrick used his own authority to instill fear, whispering, "No one will believe you. I am the police." The final indictment, at least 12 women with 85 offenses, including dozens of RAPE counts, spanning different stages of his career. Notably, many times victims had tried to report. Some went to local police, but their cases were dismissed or never connected. The uniform created a zone of silence. Few wanted to believe a veteran officer could be the attacker. The investigation only truly began in 2021, when one woman reported in detail being held and assaulted. As police reviewed the files, old statements resurfaced. Testimonies from previous years, once set aside, now formed a continuous picture. Each victim appeared at a different point in time, but all told the same story. A beginning in trust, an ending in confinement. On January 16, 2023, Carrick admitted guilt in multiple charges. The court described the matter as one of the longest and most serious series of crimes ever linked to a British police officer. Sentencing took place on February 7th. The judge handed down 36 life sentences with a minimum term of 30 years and 239 days. A figure exact to the day, as if to underline the precise calculation of law. In the courtroom, Carrick showed little reaction. The recorded image, A middle-aged man, head lowered, eyes vacant. No apology, no explanation. The victims, seated in the gallery, remained silent. Some cried, not for the sentence, but as memories resurfaced. In the file, one woman said, "I once believed, when I saw police, I would be safe, but he turned that trust into a rope." The case shook the entire police system. The press called Carrick the police rapist. Emergency meetings were held, officials forced to acknowledge the gap. For years, dozens of reports had not been handled properly. An internal review concluded power concealed by the uniform allowed him to continue. In Hertfordshire, where Carrick had lived, neighbors expressed surprise. They remembered a quiet man, walking his dog in the early mornings, nodding in greeting. No one noticed anything unusual. That contrast deepened the chill of the case. An ordinary exterior, concealing violence, sustained for nearly 2 decades. After the trial, the question was not only about Carrick's crimes, but also about the system that allowed him to persist for so long. Heavy sentences could close an individual file, but the social aftereffect did not end. In the newspapers, Carrick's image in his old uniform was printed beside the words, 85 offenses. A dry notation, yet enough to turn a once trusted face into a symbol of betrayal. When the prison gates closed, the 30-year sentence had only begun. But in public memory, the question remained: if one badge, one uniform could conceal crimes for 17 years, how many other doors remained closed, holding secrets never opened? If David Carrick turned his badge into a shield for concealment, the next man chose another path: disappearance. A Scottish man, facing charges of abuse, staged his own false death, leaving the California coast as the last trace. But instead of an ending, it was the beginning of a flight, with testimonies from women and children still waiting to be heard. Avis once appeared in Inverness, Scotland, as a familiar face. He sold goods on the street, spoke softly, lived with a large family. To outsiders, Avis was a father, a small merchant, sometimes noted as a minor public figure in the local community. But behind that surface, for 2 decades, he maintained a chain of hidden acts. Later testimonies revealed that from 1997 to 2017, multiple women and children became his victims. The method was not complex. Avis used his standing in the community to approach young women, or the children he had opportunities to watch over. The indictment specified 3 rape charges and 2 charges of child sexual assault. The behavior repeated under the cover of a kind father, a trusted neighbor. For years, no suspicion was raised. Everything shifted when victims began to speak. A young woman came forward, then a child. Gradually, the file thickened. In 2019, when an arrest warrant was issued, Avis disappeared. In Scotland, a car was found abandoned near the coast. On the sand lay a few personal items, as if a man had walked into the sea to end his life. The news spread quickly. Avis missing, possibly dead. A staged death, enough to mislead at first. In reality, he was alive. Avis flew to the United States, moved across states, and eventually hid in California. There he lived in shadow, under another name, renting cheap rooms, blending into communities where no one knew who he was. The escape lasted nearly 2 years, until U.S. federal authorities traced him. In July 2019, he was arrested in Colorado Springs and extradited to the UK. In Glasgow, the trial began in June 2021. Victims appeared one after another. Their stories aligned, stretching across years, from small rooms in Scotland to nights without witnesses. One young woman testified, "He told me not to speak, that no one would believe me. I stayed silent for years, until I knew I was not the only one." The statement was read aloud in court, in a room that fell completely silent. The judge listened. The prosecution presented a chain of evidence, and little time was needed to reach a conclusion. On the 11th of June, 2021, Avis was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment at the High Court in Glasgow. Given his advanced age, the sentence amounted, in practice, to the remainder of his life behind bars. The press called Avis the fake death fugitive, not only for the assaults, but for the calculated staging of his own death. One detail drew public attention. When Scottish police sealed the staged scene, they found a notebook left in the abandoned car. A few lines scrawled in unclear handwriting. Some interpreted it as a farewell note. To investigators, it was a clumsy diversion. The after effect of the trial was not limited to the figure of 15 years, but to the gap it left behind. 2 decades, many victims living in silence. Some had left Scotland and never returned, unwilling to confront what had happened. An investigative report noted, "Conduct repeated over many years, without detection, is a failure of the community to hear its faintest voices." In the memory of those who had met Avis, the image of him selling goods on the street remained. An ordinary face, unobtrusive, unremarkable. When the truth was revealed, that ordinariness became the most frightening element. It served as a reminder that danger does not always carry clear signs. The prison door closed on Avis, but the question remained open. A man can fake his death, vanish from a shoreline, and live as a ghost on another continent for years. How many others remain unrecognized, living in the silence of communities that appear safe? From a fugitive who escaped by faking death, the files returned to Manchester, where another figure did not choose disappearance, but remained among crowds. He appeared in bars, approached intoxicated men, smiled, then invited them back to his flat. When police examined his hard drives, they did not find a few scattered clips, but a vast archive, hundreds of videos, hundreds of lives turned into evidence. Manchester, 2015 to 2017. In the area around bars and nightclubs, Reynhard Sinaga was a recurring familiar face. He was unobtrusive, an architecture student from Indonesia, polite, with an approachable smile. His flat near the city center contained a sofa, a study desk, a few stacks of books, indistinguishable from ordinary student accommodation. But over 2 years, that flat became the setting for one of the largest series of crimes in Britain's history. The method repeated itself. Cold and methodical, Sinaga often waited near bar exits at dawn. When young men staggered out, too drunk to find their way home, he approached. He smiled, offered a place to sleep, or said he would help them get a taxi. The outward kindness was the first door. When a victim entered the flat, a drink had already been prepared. In the glass was not alcohol, but GHB, a colorless, odorless substance that produces rapid loss of consciousness. Within minutes, their bodies collapsed. The camera had already been set. Sinaga pressed record. Each video was identical. The victim motionless, him moving, taking control, capturing everything. Afterwards, he placed them back, waited until they woke, or called a taxi, sending them away as if nothing had happened. In their memory, the night was a blank. This repetition meant many never knew they had been victims. The truth began to surface in June 2017. A man awoke in Sinaga's flat, realized he had been assaulted, fought back, knocked him unconscious, and called police. From there, the hidden sequence opened. During investigation, police seized phones and computers. Inside was a vast archive. 159 offenses recorded, including 136 RAPE counts, with at least 48 victims identified. One officer described, "We opened each file, and every file was another man, collapsed on the sofa, unaware he had become evidence." For months, police compared faces from the videos with scattered reports of memory loss from the community. Many did not believe it when notified, assuming they had only drunk too much. One victim stated, "I thought I just stayed over at his flat, and the next morning still believed he was only being kind. But when I saw the video, I knew the truth. I remembered nothing, but the images were undeniable." The first trial took place in January 2020. Manchester Crown Court heard an indictment of record scale, 159 charges. The jury fell silent as clips were shown. Not for the scenes themselves, but for the dry repetition, hundreds of times, like a pattern. The judge sentenced him to life, with a minimum term of 30 years. On appeal, the minimum was increased to 40 years. The press called Sinaga the most prolific rapist, not only for the number of victims, but for the systematic method. He did not act in impulse, but built an archive, arranged files in order, labeled them with clear codes. Police described it as a catalogue, where each human being was reduced to an entry. In Manchester, the case left a heavy aftereffect. Canal Street, once regarded as lively and safe for young people, became linked with the image of a predator. Many bars posted warnings about drinks, urging visitors not to accept anything from strangers. The minimal trust of the community fractured. The case file recorded another detail. Sinaga often sent boastful messages to friends through apps. In one he wrote, "If they don't remember, then they can't see themselves as victims." Those cold words, read aloud in court, silenced the room. When the prison doors closed, the 40-year term had only begun. But on the sealed hard drives, 159 videos remained, stored in the evidence archive. No explanation, no clear motive, only repetition, hundreds of times, like a nightmare filmed from many angles. And the final question still echoed. In the memory blanks victims carried for years, what was more frightening, that they were attacked, or that they never knew they had appeared in a predator's collection? These cases did not end with sentences for each offender. They left behind a stark warning. A predator does not always wear a strange face. Sometimes he smiles, offering a hand to help you up. Sometimes he wears the title of protector. Sometimes he is the new acquaintance from an app, or just an ordinary figure in a crowd. In the dark of alleys, in student rooms, or on streets lit with neon, danger remains. The only lesson to draw: be wary of hands extended too easily, invitations that seem harmless, and faces society assumes are trustworthy. Because the line between a kind gesture and a trap is sometimes only a door closing in silence. If any detail in these files leaves you unsettled, leave a comment below. And if you wish to continue opening unseen records, remember to subscribe to Unseen True Crime Documentary, so you will be the first to face the truths hidden in the dark.